I'm gonna take a guess and say that most of you guys here are already familiar with Deep Archimedea at this point, and before you go, whoa, really? Is that the hardest thing in Warframe right now, Mello? The challenges and restrictions here are different for everyone, okay? Maybe it's been a smooth sailing for you even through the multiple hotfixes since launch, which in that case, please do feel free to let me know down in the comments. Or maybe it's been the most frustrating experience in Warframe yet, and you can't figure out what it is that DE is trying to achieve. I have my reasons for thinking Deep Archimedea may be the hardest game mode in Warframe so far, and you may have yours for or against that, so let's talk about it, because I want to tell you all about how I went from Nidus is going to be epic to that was terrible. But first, some important things I should tell you about. I admit the video titles here are sometimes on the more sensational side, but I genuinely did have more trouble than anticipated in last week's Deep Archimedea sortie. In fact, I was only able to scrape by with some help from Kyle. We had an agreement where one person would run whatever loadout they wanted to help carry the other across the finish line, and then swap roles to repay the favor. It's kind of cheating, I guess, but yeah, I did actually try to solo the entire thing several times in the beginning and unsurprisingly failed. I know there's a little text box that pops up in game telling you that things are gonna get hard and you shouldn't cry about it. That's not what it says exactly, but you get the point. DE strongly recommends a full squad for this game mode, but alas, you'll still have idiots like me trying to solo them as if there's a leaderboard for it somewhere. Maybe there is. But yeah, you can make Deep Archimedea as easy or difficult for yourself to an extent. Consequence being the reward, and the way I see it, people are going to play these types of game modes expecting to net all of the rewards, right? Especially the top tier ones locked behind Elite Archimedea, because that's like the finish line. I don't think anyone plays just to get half of the available prizes, unless the prize for first place is something you already have a metric a ton of. Happens a lot when you've dedicated a significant portion of your life to Warframe. Yeah, and so to get all the rewards for Deep Archimedea, you have to turn up all the knobs and switches and accept the quote-unquote optional challenges, which means narrowed down Warframe and weapon choices along with a bunch of debuffs. Don't get me wrong, that can make for engaging gameplay, as we saw with circuit mode for Deviri. At least I personally found it engaging to actually put effort into building out frames and weapons, and there's that tinkerer's satisfaction from taking something that's not very good and turning it into a million DPS dealing weapon of mass destruction. But unlike circuit mode, you don't get any powerful buffs or decrees to help offset having to use less than ideal gear, sometimes very less than ideal. Couple that with stuff like empowered enemies layered with a massive damage reduction. I mean, it really does get ridiculous at 97, 98%. Like, do you actually want us to kill the enemy or not, DE? Sorry for the interruption, guys. Yeah, ads suck, especially on YouTube, but how about a helpful recommendation? I bet you all buy your games on Steam, which is great, but what if there's a way to get those games and some free stuff on the side? Well, all you gotta do is just buy them on Green Man Gaming, where even if you get something at full price, you'll still receive benefits in the form of XP, which is part of their loyalty program. All the Steam keys sold here are also sourced directly from the publishers, so no middlemen or scammy nonsense. I've also found that sometimes there's better deals here than on even Steam. Not to mention that a portion of any money spent on Green Man Gaming does go towards ecosystem restoration initiatives, which is pretty cool to see. It's kinda nice to know that your dollar would go further than just ending up in some OnlyFans Thoughts bathtub. So the next time you're thinking about buying games, it's probably worth checking out Green Man Gaming through the links in the description. Even just clicking on them to see what's on sale today does help out the channel a lot.
Please note that for adblock users, the links in the description may get flagged. Do not be alarmed. Your internet history is safe. Purchases made on the site are recorded solely for the purposes of crediting the channel appropriately. It helps Mello afford soup time for the month.
So yeah, feel free to whitelist and save those links, save yourself some money, and get gaming today. Let me just show you what I had to deal with last week. For the personal modifiers here, I had fractured armor, which reduces armor by 10% for 10 seconds every time you cast an ability, so not too big of a deal. And then abbreviated abilities, which meant a 75% reduction in ability duration. big yikes, followed by transference distortion, which meant I couldn't go into operator or drifter mode, and finally ammo deficit, which is kind of self-explanatory. Now we look at the mission side of things: survival with no life support beacons. In fact, you'd have to kill enemy necromechs to breathe. Combo hostile regeneration with all the enemy buffs, that made the necromechs an absolute force to be reckoned with, especially for me, as I was stuck with a subpar Soma Prime and Cycron. More on that later. Anyways, the second mission was arguably even tougher. I mean, mirror defense with all enemies having overguard so they could just make a beeline for the eyeball and destroy it in seconds. But once again, we see CC frames and abilities completely getting fricked over, but hey, it's a challenging game mode, so I guess it's okay. The final mission, which was an assassination, wasn't anything too crazy, thankfully. It just took forever to kill the Baklava monster. So why did I pick Nidus? Simple. Because I already had enough put into him to get a decent-ish build going without much effort, really, which I had to do anyways with the Soma Prime and unlocking all the Incarnate upgrades, but whatever. Here's the build. Could be better, I guess, but Archon Continuity and Larva Burst here really do work nicely together. I thought the additional stacks of Corrosive would help against enemies with, I don't know, up to 20 million EHP. It was kind of fun to ragdoll the enemies around, but the Larva Augment didn't really help that much, I'd say. Those mechs were really tough. Admittedly, Umbral Fiber and Umbral Vitality here were kinda pointless, especially when I got help from Kyle, who played Revenant with the Mesmer Skin Augment. Parasitic Link alone was actually enough for Nidus to hang on, but due to the massive duration debuff, it lasted for about 20 seconds, down from 93, so I had to recast it frequently. Otherwise, one straight projectile would do enough damage to start deleting mustaches, which if I then went down meant a mission failure because I couldn't get into operator mode. You see the problem? Now, survivability is not all that important if there's nothing you need to survive from. Strong weapons could have made everything easier, of course, and so I thought the Tenet Cycron was going to carry me through. Not really, it turned out. I mean, here's the build. Not the best, I suppose, but I doubt there's anything I could have done to this thing to increase the DPS by like 10 times, because as is, with the very limiting magazine size, against Necromechs, it was like not even blowing a dent. It was like I was polishing the Voidrig's exterior, like helping it almost. And that was quite demoralizing. The Soma Prime, on the other hand, was unfortunately even worse. I put everything I could into this thing, short of a Riven, and it was not even close to being good enough. Doesn't help that the Incarnate mode has slower fire rate for whatever reason. I'm really not a fan of having these balancing things for weapon upgrades that you have to put a lot of effort into unlocking and ranking up, that a lot of Warframe players probably aren't even aware of because it's locked really far into the game. But yeah, at least the Praetos was awesome. I put Carnus Mandible on it for the status immunity, which made sense to me because I was constantly using heavy attacks. It was also super great with the Dreamer's Wrath Tennokai mod, but unfortunately, still not very effective against the Rogue Necromechs because it's kind of tricky to hit their weak spots with the melee weapons, and it was kind of awkward to use against the final boss as well. So yeah, with the gear I had available to me, it was quite difficult to play effectively. Near impossible if trying to solo. Maybe I should have picked a different loadout, but that then presents a problem, I feel. Because if only certain weapons are viable for the Deep Archimedea game mode, then even if you manage to max everything out, there's a possibility that you might end up with a week of Deep Archimedea needing some hard carrying, which is not a problem for some people, but then you're not really actively participating, and that may be a disappointing experience for some. Remember when I mentioned how Kyle and I switched places helping each other out? Well, when it was my turn to carry, I brought good old Cromer with the Latum, surprising absolutely no one, and then proceeded to just bulldoze through everything, surprising yet again absolutely no one. I didn't even touch the build or anything since last time. So yeah, I can see how Deep Archimedea can be really easy or really difficult depending on RNG. To be clear, I don't hate Deep Archimedea or want any big fundamental changes. I think it is neat for what it is. I just wish more weapons could be made viable for it, like maybe Archon shards for your Soma Prime. Actually, that might be too much. It's a question of balancing, I guess. A tale as old as time, which is certainly not something easy to do. Perhaps some really bad pieces of gear could receive much needed tweaks or better incarnates. I think that's the best anyone could realistically hope for. So yeah, I'd really like to know what you guys think, so please do feel free to leave a comment. I'll read them. Also check out the links in the description to the Discord server, merch store, Ko-Fi and Patreon if you think the content here is neat, or you could also click on one of the other videos here to watch more.